Hello and welcome to the Press Room with WCN-TV, brought to you by the Wilson County News. We're your source for community and communication. I'm your host, Julia, the Marketing and Social Media Specialist here at the Wilson County News. Today, we're talking in depth about topics from the September 7 and 14 editions of the Wilson County News. We'll be covering the following topics: the Wilson County Jailhouse Museum Restoration Project, Coop for Kids, a local nonprofit with a mission of supporting youth participating in local livestock shows, and the Kirchoff Prairie, also known as Kirchoff Family Farm, and the work they do to conserve and nurture South Texas wildlife. You can read the Wilson County News, available on newsstands near you, to learn more about any of these topics today. Or consider subscribing to print, digital, or both editions of the Wilson County News so you never miss an edition. You can subscribe at wilsoncountynews.com/subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on the platform you're watching today so you never miss an episode of the Press Room or any of our other WCN-TV news. In August, we shared information about the Wilson County Historical Society's September 11th Chicken Fajita Lunch fundraiser, which benefited. In August, we shared information about the Wilson County Historical Society's September 11th Chicken Fajita Lunch fundraiser, which benefited the restoration of the Wilson County Jailhouse Museum. Here today to tell us about the results of their recent fundraising efforts, plus future plans and ways that you can support this historical project, is Mila Hopkins, the Secretary of the Wilson County Historical Society. Let's dive into the history and the importance of the Jailhouse Museum and its restoration. So welcome to the show, Mila.
Thank you.
Of course. So first things first, are the proceeds from the fundraiser that y'all had on September 11th to be used for any specific part of the museum's restoration?
Nothing specific. Anytime there's a fundraiser, the money goes in the bank, and then they use it as it's needed for whatever project they're working on at the time.
That makes sense. But this will go to the jailhouse restoration.
Absolutely. All $3,400 of it.
Wow.
We had a good turnout.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
Yes.
What are the Historical Society's future plans to raise funds?
That's good. We have a list, and ideas come up, let's put it on the list. And then the chit chat back and forth, is it feasible? What's involved, all the little details. And then sometimes the bigger projects have to go in front of the board once we get everything worked out, and they approve it or say, you know what, take it back.
Right.
And it kind of goes on to the membership, and then we hit the ground running.
Awesome. Okay. So that being said, have y'all finalized any of these plans yet?
We're close on one. We've got one coming up. The drive-by lunch was kind of a short deal. I mean, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
But thank goodness it was successful. But yes, I've got one going now, and I don't want to divulge it yet.
Right.
Because there's a few things that have to be worked out, but it's going to be the type of thing of watch Facebook, watch
Right.
Wilson County newspaper, and you'll see it. And it's going to involve all of Wilson County, not just Floresville.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
That is exciting.
Yes.
Do you have any hints for how the community would be able to support this project? Is it a ticket buying deal? Is it a donating deal?
Well, the money's going to go to the jailhouse. They will get something for it. That's why I can't talk too much about it. I don't want to give it away. But as far as the community goes, they're wonderful. HEB, Walmart, they're usually right there with a donation or help for us, and which is absolutely wonderful. Another thing we do is Floresville Opry.
Of course.
I mean, that's the biggest one. People love it. They come from all over, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Sell out every month. Viola Henke's the producer, and she has done such a fabulous job. This has been going on for 11 years.
11 years.
But people can sponsor. We have a little thing, and for $250, you get your name out there for your company or however you want to do it. You get a table for 8, and it's a great opportunity to network, pass out cards, meet your friends,
Right.
dance,
Yes.
eat, it's a wonderful evening. It's the first Thursday of every month.
Well, is there anything else that you think the community needs to know about y'all's fundraising efforts?
Well, they're always, it's great. It's that Floresville's there. Greatest bunch of people. But I do want to mention that John Wayne Services donated, installed heating and air conditioning at the jailhouse because there was nothing.
Yeah.
And they did that for us. So now when you come in to visit,
there will be AC.
There will be AC, which is just fabulous. And, we encourage people, if they want, join the Historical Society. We meet every, the third Tuesday of the month. There's a meet and greet at 6:30 and snacks. Always got to have the snacks.
Yes.
We have a general meeting, and then there's always a historical presentation, which is great. It's really interesting because I've only been here 5 years. So I'm learning, and I really appreciate that. And we have a Facebook page. And of course, Wilson County News.
Yes.
They're great supporters of us, and they sponsor at the Opry.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Let's dive into the history and the importance of the Jailhouse Museum and its restoration. We're talking with Tara Lee, the Wilson County Historical Society's current expert on and overseer of the Wilson County Jailhouse Museum. Welcome to the press room.
Thank you.
Of course. So why is the Wilson County Jailhouse Museum an important historical structure?
Yeah, good question. So the historical structure, the jailhouse, has been around since 1887.
Wow.
Yes, it was actually built, it was the second jailhouse here in Floresville, the first one becoming inadequate for the amount of people, then the population that they had in Wilson County, plus it was becoming dilapidated, basically coming down and needed to be repaired.
Right.
So they built a new jailhouse, and what's exciting about it, which a lot of people don't realize, is the sheriff and his family actually lived in the same building as the prisoners.
Wow.
So our jailhouse does demonstrate that, and in its history, there's been 13 sheriffs and their families that lived there with the prisoners, and until 1974, which was quite over 100 years worth of. Or about 100 years worth of people living there. So it's pretty exciting. As far as the importance of, having a jail, right, is it helped secure us as the county seat. It was one of the things in consideration for becoming the county seat. But also there were a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of outlaws and people that did wrong back in the 1800s as they did today. So they were kept there, and that building has seen Floresville, the change of Floresville over that past 100 years while it was open, and it's amazing to see some of the history. Right,
so,
yes.
Then I guess why is it important to complete the restorations that have been planned for the museum? Why are they needed, and what are they?
Sure. So the restoration has actually been not completed. We started it in 2020. The jailhouse before was a museum, which held a lot of artifacts and a lot of the history within Wilson County and Floresville itself. And the need to actually renovate it came from some of the walls deteriorating, the floorboards being decayed, things of that nature. So it is on the National the Texas, Historical Monument. So we want to make sure that we keep it up to date.
Yeah.
The things that are being restored or that have been restored are the living quarters for the sheriff and his family. So their rooms, living room, and the bed. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs and downstairs. And right now we are actually working on the floor in the dining room and kitchen have been torn up, and we are replacing the floor with concrete due to some things that we have planned for the future. And what will happen next, or what we still need to do for the next part of that question, is we still need to do the ceiling in the dining room and kitchen, as well as replace a bunch of windows. And the actual cell areas haven't even been touched yet. So we still need to work on replacing some of the walls, the plaster, the walls, and work on getting some of the paint that's coming off of the cells themselves, the bars, to get that removed. So there's still quite a bit to do.
Right. And from my understanding, it took a long time to get the project moving, because you can't just replace things however you want to replace them and whenever you want to. They have to meet certain guidelines that are set by that Texas Historical marker. Or
Yeah, the
monument.
commission, right.
Right. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about those requirements? What do they entail? Is it basically just trying to get it as historically accurate?
Yes, so the biggest piece of it is that when you're restoring something that's considered historical, you need to keep as much of it as the way it looked back when it was first, or back before you did your renovations.
Right.
So that's one of the big pieces in order for it to be considered historical. If you start so that's why we call it more of like a rehabilitation. If you actually renovate where you're tearing down walls and creating new rooms or make, whatever that may be, then that is not true to the original structure. And so it could take it off of the historical commission's historical markers.
And we don't want that.
Yes, they can be. They consider them there have been many buildings throughout history that have been decommissioned due to those reasons, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we preserve as much of the history of it as we can.
Absolutely. So does the restoration project have a timeline as of now?
So good question. So the timeline is still kind of fluid because we do rely on grants, donations, fundraisers to have the money, because we're all volunteers.
Right.
So we rely on that in order to pay somebody to do the rehabilitation work, which is why it's taking so long, because it takes quite a bit of money to make sure it's done right and it gets it back to how it looked in the past. And so we just renewed our permit and we're hoping within the next 5 years it'll be completed. We do hope for sooner than that, but our target is within the next 5 years it will be completed.
All right. And so will the museum be able to open before it's 100% done?
Yes, we actually already have been open. So
Really?
yes, we opened during the Lions Club car show. For a short period of time for tours, and we do plan on opening for the Peanut Festival. So after the parade up until probably 3 or 4 o'clock, depending on how much traffic we get in, for tours. Now the tour will be of the quarters for the sheriff and his family, and you'll also be able to go up to the jail if you want to, but there's no museum artifacts in there right now because of the rehabilitation. We want to wait until major things are done before we start putting those very old artifacts back in, because we don't want them to get destroyed.
Right.
So, but we are doing tours, and even though there's no museum items in there, it is very interesting to see how it was built and where the prisoners stayed and what they were subject to back in the 1800s.
I bet it is. So what kind of activities did the museum host prior to the start of renovations?
Not many. So as I mentioned, it was a museum. They did have artifacts in there, and it was really just tours, and they were only open one weekend, one Saturday a month, and then just for special events. Due to the amount, again, we're all volunteers, but also due to the amount of people that would actually come through the museum. So we're really hoping to increase the exposure of the museum once it gets renovated and we put things back in there, to bring a bigger crowd and be open longer and more.
Awesome. So what activities are y'all planning for the museum in the future?
Good question. We're still defining everything, right? We as an organization, when I say we, meaning the Historical Society as an organization, or as a nonprofit organization, we have a lot of ideas. Right. Obviously, we're going to be bringing back the tours for the museum once we get the artifacts back in. We do also have other ideas of maybe doing some small functions within the jailhouse, maybe some dinners or something like that for a very small crowd, to rent it out for things like that. I'm just going to say that as a piece of it. We're still working out all the details for everything else, and we'll share as soon as we know for sure we're going to do those things.
Awesome. So we've heard some rumors that the museum is haunted. Can you confirm these rumors?
That is one of the most popular questions I get about the Jailhouse Museum, and I can confirm because I actually have been there and have witnessed some paranormal activity. I know there's skeptics, but I would say that if you're a believer, then yes, there is paranormal activity in the jail. I don't know if it's the prisoners, if it's the sheriffs, or if it's somebody completely different that's in the jail creating the activity, but there's definitely been some activity that not just myself, but others have reported witnessing.
Wow. So are haunted tours a possibility in the future?
We are still, so I'm going to say yes. We are working out all the details on being able to do that. We want to try to do paranormal tours, so not just a tour.
Right.
We could do the historical tours of the museum, but we also want to look at doing a longer tour with somebody that's interested in more of the paranormal side of it, and not just learn about the history, but also learn about maybe some of the, I say, more macabre history of what could have occurred in the jail and what could be causing paranormal activity. That is something that's we're planning on, again, working out all the details, so I don't have timelines yet, as well as possibly allowing some overnight investigations for some of the paranormal societies that are interested.
Wow, that's exciting stuff.
It is.
So exciting.
Can I just real quick want to say that even though it does have paranormal activity, which a lot of historic buildings that have been around for that long probably have something associated to them, our biggest major thing that we want to actually display and to show everybody is that it's the history of Floresville and the history of the county. It's very interesting that many people that live in Floresville, especially since we've grown so much, don't even know that we used to have a railroad. They don't know that Floresville used to be like one of the big providers of a lot of the crops, like vegetables and stuff, back in the 1800s.
Right.
And those are things that we want to make sure that people that come to Floresville or that live in Floresville can come and learn about the history of Floresville and be proud of the city and the county that they live in.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for all the work you're doing for this beautiful building and all of the history it has, and for your time today.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me.
In the September 7th and 14th editions of the Wilson County News, we shared information about Co-op for Kids and the fundraiser they're having today, September 17th. Here to share more about the organization, what they do, and why they do it is Deborah Rail, a St. Hedwig board member of Co-op for Kids. Welcome to the press room.
Thank you.
Of course. So when was Co-op for Kids started and why?
Co-op for Kids actually started in August of 2021. It was after when we were coming out of the COVID pandemic, and a lot of the youth stock shows had actually been canceled during COVID. And some of them that did still hold stock shows, we saw a really, really decreased amount of money going to those kids at the auction. And so a bunch of us got together and decided we wanted to do something to try and raise more money for the kids that actually placed their animals at their county and local stock shows.
Absolutely. That's really nice.
Yeah.
So what do you do to raise that money, and other than raising money, and why are those functions important to our youth?
Well, last year, because it was our first year, we were running on a little bit of a tight timeline, and so we were able to pull together a raffle that had about 25 items on it. We raised $25,000 that we gave back to the youth in Bear and surrounding counties. And then it's important, I think, because we need to be able to teach our kids about agriculture and keep that legacy going so that they know the next generation understands where our food and stuff comes from. So that's kind of why we do it. We are all parents or grandparents of kids that showed. I grew up showing in stock shows when I was a young person, so I'm just trying to give back a little bit of what I learned. The exciting thing this year is we've had a lot more time, and so we have our big fundraiser this coming Saturday on the 17th. It's going to be a reverse raffle event that's going to be held at the St. Hedwig American Legion Hall. And so it's for adults only because alcohol is involved, but you buy a ticket for $100. That gets 2 adults into the Hawaiian themed event.
Cool.
They get dinner, margaritas, beer, and then we have obviously the reverse raffle event. We're having a live and silent auction. We're having a couple of gun card raffles and a lot of other things going on. So it's going to be a really, really exciting event on Saturday.
Very cool. All right. So speaking of the event on Saturday, do you have a fundraising goal?
We actually don't have a finite number that we're looking to raise. We just want to make sure that we raise enough money to help as many kids as we possibly can.
Awesome. Okay. So how does the fundraising work? When I was looking through the information that y'all have available for the public, it seems a little bit complicated in how you are getting the funds and then dispersing them.
So a lot of the funds will come, like I said, for the event. We have sponsors that step up and give us an amount of money just as a sponsor for the actual event. A lot of folks donate the items. So the actual money for this coming event is more about sponsorship and selling of the tickets for the actual event. And then obviously during the event, what we bring in from the silent auction, the live auction, and that sort of thing. But the kids can be involved in helping us sell the raffle tickets for the event. And what we have them printed in books of 25 tickets, $5 a piece, so the value of it is $125. We ask that each exhibitor or student sell at least one book of those tickets, and we give back 80% of what they sell. So if a child sells the one minimum book, they get $100 back if they place their animal at auction. If they sell 2 books, 3 books, then they get 80% of whatever the value is that they sold. And so we keep track of that. I'm the treasurer of the group, and so I get to do all the money, and I keep track of all the kids that actually took books of tickets, how much they sold, and then we make sure we know what county they're from. And we go to those various auctions throughout the spring, the fall and the spring as they happen, and we make sure that we give that money back to those kids on their animal.
How cool. Okay. So can those who may not be able to attend the event still assist Co-op for Kids in other ways?
Yes, absolutely. So if someone would like to help but can't attend the event, they can still purchase one of the event tickets for $100. That ticket will still go into the reverse raffle, and if it's drawn and they win, they obviously get the funds. They don't have to be present to win. And then if they don't feel comfortable doing that, we also ask for silent auction or live auction donations. So if they're able to bring something on Saturday to the American Legion to give us to put into the silent or live auction, we accept that also as a way of support.
Awesome. All right. So another question, how can folks interested in joining Co-op for Kids on the board side, or even as kids who want to be involved with the organization, how can they do that?
Well, we have 2 ways that they can reach us. We have an email account, which is coopforkids21@gmail.com. So koopforkids21 at gmail.com. And then they can also find us on Facebook. We have an account on Facebook under Co-op for Kids.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for all the information today and for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate your support.
In the September 14th edition of the Wilson County News, we shared information about another event that's happening today, September 17th. Kirchoff Prairie, also known as Kirchoff Family Farm, is hosting a volunteer day. Here today to tell us about the Kirchoff Family Farm, their volunteer day event, their mission, and their history is Don Kirchoff. Welcome to the press room, Don.
Well, thank you.
Of course. So what is the Kirchoff Family Farm, and when and how did it come into your family?
Well, my parents bought the property in 1954. I was 10 years old at the time, the oldest of 5 children. We all grew up there. It's 200 acres in the Three Oaks community here in Wilson County.
Wow.
We kids grew up picking cotton, hauling hay, pulling corn. We did all the work that farm kids did in the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
And our parents taught us how to farm. They also encouraged us to get educations. So once we graduated from high school, all 5 of us went to college, got degrees, pursued our careers. Our parents, decades went by. Our parents died. We inherited the farm. So the farm then became a prairie because we chose not to farm it, but instead to restore it to the conditions that existed a couple hundred years ago when the original Europeans arrived, at least to the extent that we could. So we're engaged in that process right now.
Wow. So when did the family farm get recognized as or officially become a prairie?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure there is an official designation of prairie, but when we were into this several years, and you could look at the property and it was no longer a farm. It was obviously not being row cropped.
Yeah.
But what was growing there was the environment of prairie, so it just made more sense to call it a prairie. And basically that's what we've done for the last several years.
Okay, that makes sense. So what does it mean then to be a prairie?
Yeah. Basically, I would say a prairie is that environment where the native plants that lived here 100 or 200 years ago lived prior to a lot of human intervention.
Right.
And it's big, high biodiversity, many kinds of plants, grasses, forbs, many kinds of animals. That's what populated the landscape a century or two ago. That's what a prairie was. So I would say that's what it means to be a prairie, to be that environment that existed a couple of centuries ago.
That absolutely makes sense. So does the farm now perform special functions because it's a prairie?
I would say definitely. The functions that it would perform would be those associated with the natural environment, such as restore wildlife.
Okay.
That's a significant function. During the final years of our parents' life and when they were renting it out, modern farming techniques really produced a monoculture. We had no bobcats, no quail. The purple martins were gone.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a sterile environment. And that's the environment that we've really switched over to now to be a prairie environment.
Okay. So now working to kind of take it back in time to several hundred years ago and turn this 200-acre farm back into a prairie.
Yes.
Right.
So those the functions that it satisfies now is it's a place for students to do research. We have about
Right.
5 universities have done projects out there. They come out and they research something, whether it's monarch populations or green jays or butterflies. So another function that it performs is to study the wildlife that have been restored. Another function is to be a place that the public can come to. I mean, it's really interesting to drive out there and see many different kinds of butterflies because the environment now supports that type of biodiversity.
Right. So this is a question that I didn't give you to prepare, but do y'all provide tours to the public, that sort of thing?
We do. We're not organized yet for, I guess, regular tours, but anybody that wants to come out there, I meet them out there and I take them around the prairie.
Awesome.
So we do that. And then on our volunteer days, like we have this coming Saturday, very often the first time volunteers are out there, they want to see the prairie. So
Right.
yes, we do tours.
That's cool. So what is your role at the farm?
Well, my role as well as my siblings is to do that work or at least to lead the effort that can change the property from row cropping to prairie. So what that role involves is finding agencies with the knowledge to do that, because none of us kids were born with that information. We did not know how to restore a prairie. So our first role was to find experts who did,
Makes sense.
and then also find financial support to help make it happen. And then now the continuing role is to schedule events like volunteer days, workshops that we have, special projects.
Very cool. All right. So why do you think that wildlife conservation is important?
Yeah, I think it's really important because wildlife has been a part of the human experience, all of our creation actually. We grew up with wildlife through thousands of generations. And I think the presence of wildlife is sort of a measure of how healthy the environment is that we live in.
Right.
And also some of those wildlife are what pollinate the food, the plants that produce the food we eat.
Yeah.
So all of that together makes wildlife very, very important to preserve.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So, just a minute ago, you mentioned that you're having a volunteer day event. It's happening today, September 17th. So, what does today's event entail, and why is it important to the efforts of the prairie?
Well, first of all, volunteers have been absolutely critical in restoring the prairie. There's a great deal of work involved, a whole bunch of different types of projects,
Yeah.
and there are volunteers from all kind of organizations and here from Wilson County who have helped do that work. So this Saturday, what we're doing is we are weeding a couple of Manfreda plots that we have. The Manfreda is a rare plant, and it is the host plant for an endangered butterfly that used to live in Wilson County. The last certain observation of that butterfly was in 2004.
Wow.
It may have been seen more recently than that, but we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and the National Butterfly Center to restore a population of the Manfreda maculosa. The Butterfly Center says that if we can get a population of 500 of these plants, then maybe that would be sufficient to support a colony of this butterfly. It's called the Manfreda giant skipper, I think, something like that.
Right.
So that's one thing we're doing. We have walking trails out there that need maintenance. We're going to work on that.
Right.
A person in the Wilson County Wildlife Management Association gave us a bat house,
Oh.
and so we went and installed that.
Wow.
So those are the type of projects that we're going to be working on.
So after today's event, do you plan to host others like it?
Yes, in fact, we do this event on the third Saturday of every month.
All right.
So we've been doing it for a few years. There's a group of volunteers who know the property very well, and some of them become sort of project managers out there,
Right.
and they know how to take new volunteers and work on some of these projects. But we do that every Saturday from whenever time anybody wants to arrive till anytime anybody wants to leave. So we're out there all day on Saturdays,
Wow. Okay.
the third
so
Saturday.
Lots of opportunities each month.
Oh yes, yeah, and we really welcome volunteers. I will not be able to do this forever, and the property is under a conservation easement, so it will be preserved as a prairie in perpetuity, which means generation after generation of folks from Wilson County will have that property, but they will also need to support it.
And so you also mentioned another opportunity maybe for students to come and do research at the property. So how would they get in touch with you about completing said research?
Well, we could certainly post my cell phone number and my email address.
Absolutely.
And also, the Prairie has both a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and we post information out there almost daily. It's a great way to keep track of what's going on the Prairie and determine what anybody wants to be interested in.
So can folks sign up to help at the farm outside of your volunteer events?
Great question, and yes.
Wow.
I'm retired, and I work on the Prairie 2 or 3 days a week, and I welcome anybody to come out there to work on any kind of project they're interested in. And when somebody gets really familiar with the property and they have a project going, they're welcome to come out there and support that project, whether I'm out there or not. Or my brother
Right.
Scott does a lot of work on the Prairie as well. And if anybody wants to come out there because they may want to do something like this on their property, we'd be happy to provide a tour and assist.
What are the lasting effects of creating a place where wildlife can prosper again?
Well, one of the effects is this property is only 200 acres among thousands of acres in Wilson County. It's like a postage stamp floating in an ocean of farmland and ranch land.
Yeah.
Well, that little postage stamp can be a stopping point for migratory birds, migrating butterflies. It is large enough and has enough biodiversity for many more species to survive and increase their populations above what they are diminished at today.
Right.
Whether it's insects, animals, plants, anything that lived in Wilson County a couple of hundred years ago, we would love to see come back.
Thank you so much for everything you've shared today, Don.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
That's all for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Press Room with WCN-TV, brought to you by the Wilson County News. For more information about any of the topics we covered today, see the September 7th or 14th editions of the Wilson County News or visit wilsoncountynews.com. You can also find links to corresponding articles in the description of this video. Remember to follow us on the platform you're watching today so you never miss an episode of the Press Room or any of our other WCN TV news. You can also download our app from gowilsonapp.com for free to have updates from our newsroom available to you at your fingertips. Free news resources are also available from us at wilsoncountynews.com/free news. We hope you'll tune in next week for another episode of the Press Room. See you then!